Hey, what's up, junior psych peeps? I'm going crazy, but it's gonna be great. Okay, go ahead, get out a piece of paper or a notebook to take notes. And today we are going to continue with the dual processing model of thinking, day two. And I want you to, before we take notes, give an example of system one thinking and an example of system two thinking. Now. Okay, hopefully you're back. You gave an example. System one thinking is anything that's like really fast and associative. And system two thinking is going to be something that's more slow and rational and using data. So my example I put in the comments was usually like system one's kind of like autopilot. So usually when I drive, I'm on system one thinking. I'm on autopilot. But let's say I'm driving and there's like a crazy thunderstorm, then I'm going to switch over to system two and be way more focused because the circumstances have changed into where I need to be like a lot more focused. So that's my system one, system two example. Okay. And please come on, log on to office hours, say hello, share what you're learning, talk about how you're feeling, say hey to me. Would love to see y'all. Okay. So, guiding questions for today. Today I want you to have a little bit of evidence for, and I want you to be able to evaluate the dual processing model of thinking. And why this matters, again, you'll be tested on it, and why it matters in life. Do you personally think this dual processing model of thinking is valid? Why or why not? I should say why not what not. And then I don't know. You were right. Thinking is hard. Thinking is hard sometimes, and that's okay. Okay, so I'm gonna do another at-home experiment with you, and this is actually, it's similar to what we did at the end of last class, but this is an example of some evidence for the dual processing theory of thinking. This is from Griggs and Cox, 1982, but let's jump right in. So, if there's a male's name on one side of the card, then there's an IB subject on the other side of the card. Select those cards that you definitely need to turn over to determine whether or not the cards are violating the rule. So feel free to pause and read over this a couple times. Just jot down your answers in the corner of your notebook. Okay, I have one more for you. Still Griggs and Cox, 1982. Imagine you are a police officer on duty. It is your job to ensure that people follow certain rules. The cards below have information about 4 people sitting at a table. On one side of the card is a person's age, and on the other side of the card is what a person is drinking. Here is a rule. If a person is drinking beer, then the person must be over 21. Select those cards that you definitely need to turn over to determine whether or not the people are violating the rule. So go ahead and pause and think on that and figure it out, and then meet me back here. I know you're dying to know the answers. So, for the first one, putting myself over here. Okay, so for the first one, the answer is John and football. For the second one, the answer is drinking beer and 16 years of age. Because if we just look at this one, I can show you why. You need to turn over the drinking beer card because the rule is that if someone is under 21, I'm make sure I read the rule. If a person is drinking beer, then the person must be over 21. Sorry, the wording of the rule is very important. So you need to turn over the drinking beer card to make sure that person's over 21. The 22 years of age, if you turn it over, it doesn't really matter because if they're drinking beer, that's still within the rule. If they're not drinking beer, it doesn't matter because it doesn't say that in the rule that they can't drink anything else. And then same with the drinking Coke. It doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what age the person is. Whereas we need to make sure this 16-year-old is not drinking beer to make sure the rule is not violated. And then you can go through a similar process to figure out the first one. But if you are like most people, you got the second one right and the first one wrong. And that's because researchers have found that when the task is less abstract, people make fewer errors. Meaning this first task of like IB subject and names, there's no correlation between a male or female name and an IB subject. Whereas this second task is very applicable to real life, very concrete, because it's actually something that that all of us interact with in the social world, right? Because 21 is a drinking age. So when the task is less abstract and more concrete, people tend to make fewer errors, which is evidence for this idea of the dual processing of thinking, and that when it's a more concrete task and less abstract, people can rely more on their system 1 thinking than on their system 2 thinking. Okay. So some other research, Gilead et al., and I'm not giving you big research descriptions because this is kind of just, you won't see many questions on this on the IB test. It's just more of an interesting way to have something else to talk about other than just memory. So don't worry too much about research descriptions. Just know these short little buckets of information. This one, Gilead et al., 2013, they found that there actually appears to be a difference in brain activity when you think about or carry out concrete versus abstract tasks. And here are some images of those brain scans where you can see that there are different regions in the brain activating versus concrete versus an abstract task. We will get to the point where you know these brain regions, but we don't need to do that right now. We're going to talk about brain regions and areas of the brain in the next unit, and that's coming up very soon. So now we have a little bit of evidence for the dual processing model of thinking, and now we're going to jump into evaluating it. So what are some strengths of this theory? Some strengths is that there is that biological evidence that different types of thinking may be processed in different parts of the brain, that concrete versus abstract, and that Weyson selection task and other tests for cognitive biases are really reliable in their results across different cultures, across different age groups, across different geographic locations. So a lot of reliability in those tests. Those are some strengths. Some limitations of the dual processing model of thinking. These are explained a little bit, but hopefully they'll make sense to you. The model can be seen to be overly reductionist, meaning it's kind of too simple because it does not clearly explain how or even if the system 1 and system 2 interact, or if our thinking and decision making might be influenced by emotion or other factors. And there are some psychologists who argue that there are actually a lot of different systems rather than just these two that the dual processing model talks about. And some argue that there aren't systems or even two systems, but there's a continuum of reasoning, and it's kind of all in one scale. And then last but not least, the definitions of system 1 and system 2 are not always clear. For example, fast processing, and I told you guys to remember it this way because it's an easy way to remember, but fast processing indicates the use of system 1 rather than system 2. But just because you process something quickly does not mean that it was done by system 1 all the time. Experience can influence your system 2 processing to go faster. A great example of that is like any math problem, right? Math problem takes reasoning and logic, but with a lot of experience with a certain math problem, your system 2 brain can go a lot faster, or system 2 process. Okay. So that kind of closes out dual processing model of thinking. But before you leave today, because today's a little bit shorter, I do want you to watch 2 videos that kind of set us up for next week. So continuing with our study of thinking and decision making, next week we're going to take some time to talk about cognitive biases. And before we close out, take some time to talk about these cognitive biases, before we close out the cognitive unit. And these are just some short activities to help you prepare for next week. They're still related to the dual processing model of thinking, but they are kind of moving into this idea of cognitive biases, just so you know. So the first one, I just want you to watch this video, which is from this series called Why Are We All So Stupid, which I just think is really funny, and take a few notes on what the anchoring effect is and how you might see it in your daily life. That's your first activity. It's only a 5-minute video. Just write down what the anchoring effect is and how you might see it. And then your second task is on Google Classroom. You're going to watch the What Are Heuristics video. I mentioned heuristics. Cannot talk. I mentioned heuristics last class. I told you they were shortcuts, so you might already have an idea of what a heuristic is, but this video is only 3 minutes, so still watch it. And then complete the Google form that goes along with this video. It's just 4 short questions about heuristics. And that is all I need from you this week. I hope y'all had an awesome week. Miss y'all a ton. Hopefully I'll get to see y'all soon. But please log on to office hours if you have any questions I can help y'all with. Have a great, awesome, fabulous weekend. Bye.